There it is. All right, first, thank you everyone for joining this session. My name is Carlos Prieto, and I work in co-design for learning analytics. And today I will present what we call the LADECK, which is a card-based learning analytics co-design tool. So first, this work is inspired after joining many sessions as a designer in learning and learning analytics. Most of the time, the learner and the teachers are missing in these sessions, and it's up to the developer, the data scientists, and other technical people to actually do the job. As after some years working as my research is to understand how can we engage these people, and the answer may be first to design the tool to actually do this. As just today in the learning analytics research world, we are not inviting people as stakeholders as much as we should. Students we are neglecting students' involvement during the design process, and we are only delivering tools that we think is good for them. We are making assumptions about what it is the best for everyone, not only students, but also teachers. We are misrepresenting in their learning interests for the sake of pushing our learning analytics project. For teachers, this has an impact on adoption since we are just delivering tools that they never were about or they never participated. Not engaging stakeholders like students or teachers creates a feeling of alienation from the learning process. It also makes people feel that they don't have any power about what they are using. They feel concerned about what it is the privacy on their data, how their data is being used and the analytics behind it. And there's a feel of disengagement from the learning environment. So we feel that co-design will bring engaged stakeholders in the design process. And for this, we require adaptive, interdisciplinary, and easy-to-use tools to facilitate collaboration. This paper presents the rationale driving a card-based co-design tool, specifically tuned for the learning analytics design process. This is what we call the LADECK. Card-based design games are actually used in other fields like design thinking and product design. This is a way to engage stakeholders into the technical aspects and bring a mapping technique while people actually can have conversations on the session. We take this approach to the learning analytics design and started to solve small problems to make people be interested in the design process. To do this, we came up with a problem that we have to measure how effective cards-based games are actually, and how we can bring this into learning analytics. First, we find out that cards should provide a common basis of understanding for communication in the team. Effective cards should support creative combination of information and ideas. The cards should be a semi-structured tool between blank post-its and detailed instruction manuals. And finally, the card should provide convenient summaries of useful information or methods. We use this idea to actually come up with the main elements for a learning analytics tool to work. First, we have to understand what are the components of a learning analytics that people should design. For this, we have to analyze different frameworks in the learning analytics literature right now. So we identify 8 main components. First, what it is the learning objective. Then, what is the type of analytics you want to design? Then we move on to the data source, where the information will come from. Then, the analytics method. How are we going to analyze this data? Then we move on to the testing side. How many people we need to actually measure the effectiveness of the tool. The next one is the user interface. It's how the tool will look like. It can be a dashboard, a timeline. It is very important to define what it's going to be. Then privacy. How information will be saved and what are the reliable components to keep information clear for everyone. And finally, the developer tools. What kind of technology can be used to implement the learning analytics tool? All these things have to be designed in collaboration like we propose if we want people to be engaged with the outcome of the learning analytics tool. We translate these 8 categories of components of the learning analytics tool into 8 different suites of cards. The cards are actually color-based and contain different summaries of what can be used during the sessions. We have the red for the learning objective, we have the testing side, the analytics side that we found out, and what we wanted to introduce also is that the cards can be actually expanded to actually create their own content. So we created another card, which is a wild card. In each category, they can create their own ones by writing down in these wild cards. Then we have the resources. Now, let's move on into each one of those card sheets to better understand how they can be used. Each card structure contains just a simple title describing what categories can be used for, an icon for people to later use this easily and identify the family, and a description of what is the card about. The learning objective cards are actually really good for, it's actually designed to help participants to reach agreement on the learning context, something that has to be done maybe at the beginning, but people can actually come in and out, but they have to define what it is the learning objective. The data set cards contains examples of different popular methods in learning analytics field, like information from the browser history, social networks, blogging activity, MOOC information, the review system. There are other 10 examples, and this is just an example here. The next one, the analytics type cards, actually describe what it is the analytics will be in charge of. You have to be predictive, we want to be used to be a diagnostic. We have examples that they can use as technical measure. The analytics methods card is a set of 20 different cards where they can actually use an analytics method in combination with the data source. If people want to use regression analysis, text analysis, NLP, the cards are there to provide a common language, so we try to provide as many examples as possible. The user interface cards contain many examples of how the tool may look like. Most of the time it can be a dashboard, a timeline, or a chart description of what it's going to be. People also can create their own visualizations. That's the purpose of the design process. The developer tools cards actually gives people the power just to pick one of the most important developing tools. Some sort of coding languages, what kind of technology is available, so we can use this to implement our project. The privacy cards contains different levels of managing this data, from share publicly available data to completely make it private. There are different levels that people can actually pick from and discuss if that's what they want to do. The testing side cards contain different levels of what population should be used to measure the effectiveness. Are we going to test this tool in an individual level, or we need a bigger group for this? Now, the other one is that we include this that is mostly based on cardboard games, is time and money. Learning analytics tools require these main resources. So we gave each participant different time and money tokens that they can assign to the different categories. If they think that we should spend more time doing the user interface, then they assign time there. If they think that they should spend more money hiring someone to do the analysis, then they can vote by using this resource. So for our methodology, we created different group sessions and invited diverse stakeholders, as many as we could, to actually measure the effectiveness of the cards. We invited teachers, students, developers, course directors, data scientists, learning designers, and EdTech specialists. So the cards were actually used in all of the sessions in the same way, but they produce different results that I'm going to show you as part of the results part. For the analysis, we wanted to introduce something more than just transcription, because we actually need to measure if people are actually collaborating and not only using the cards because their team is useful. We use an approach in amidst methods, qualitative and quantitative, in 3 different forms of analysis. The transcript-centric design vignettes, which is a sample of how the cards were being used. The flow analysis, which shows the sequence of the cards being used with the conversation. And the degree and type of participation that can be measured using the chart that I will show you. The design vignettes is a concept that we introduced where we use the video source from the sessions using the cards, and we start to map how the cards will be used. Like we see in the image on the left, the conversation happens between participants. We measure the degree of participation when it's actually being used the card, the facilitator action if the facilitator is actually intervening or using the cards or giving explanations, and the interaction with the tool that is in front of them in the table. So design vignette can look like a table where the facilitator action can be mapped with the conversation, and in the end with how the cards are being used. The example of participants using the LADECK is this is an example of a pilot study. Like we see on the left, participants are actually using the cards while they have in the conversation. So they use the cards and they actually start to dig around the design of the learning analytics tool. What they produced in the end looks like the ones on the right. It's a map using the cards about, in this case, they were creating a timeline dashboard using information from the review grading, which in the end actually helps to develop writing skills. So all these components have to be discussed before actually agreeing to what we want to do next. All the components for a basic learning analytics tools are here, and this is a very good key starting point. An example of this is a critical design vignette. It's like this. The conversation happens on the left, where people are discussing about privacy, this example. The interaction with the cards actually is how one of the students says that, hey, I would like the information to be private, so they play the private card. But this happens in a different way. The student actually sees the cards and sees their options. Say, hey, I can make my information private. I didn't know that this information could be done. So they play the private card. Then after discussing with the teacher about other possibilities, they realize then we need to share with the group and the specific people in other cases. That's how we agree with the cards in a different way. Now, for a quantitative analysis of what they were doing and spending most of the time, after all the sessions, we create a graph where we put the standard time that they spend in each one of these categories. Participants, most of the time, spend their time discussing how the information will look like, how the tool will look like. The user interface cards is that where they spend most of the time having the conversation. Then the data sources and the analytics method. So we expected this to happen since the learning analytics tool is mostly about delivering the tool, the data, and the analytics method. But then we have the learning objective and moving all the way to the developer tools. This doesn't mean that developer tools are actually things that people don't want to discuss. It means that there is always a pretty straightforward answer from the developers, is that we can do this because this is what we have available. This is the language that we're using. The flow analysis actually is a really good way to understand if they were actually participating in how it would look like. On the pilot study, we see, as the image presented before, we put the movement as to understand what it is the place in the sequence, and the color is the cards that were used. The number and the C2 is the amount of cards that they play. In this example, they flew from the learning context to all the categories in a very touchable way. Now, for all the groups, we did this sort of flow analysis, and we understood that they use the cards like in the same flow. They can move through the categories. That means that they can understand what the cards are actually about, and they are actually easy to use without much guidance. The other thing that we found in the flow analysis is that there are specific topics that are most relevant for people. Not all topics are discussed in the same way. The anchor categories are the place where conversation leads to other talking points. In this case, data sources is a point where conversation happens a lot. And people, even when they play not many cards, they spend a lot of time. The other one is that they spend a lot of time talking about how the tool will look like. And this leads to the other categories. If the tool is a dashboard, then the dashboard has to come from this information and it has to be tested this way. The third one that was interesting is that analytics method is an interesting way to actually move to the other categories, since analytics methods actually guide what the data source can be used. We tried this in another sessions where we give the cards without much guidance to see if the cards can be used without very specific instructions. We understood that people actually can use all the cards, but they use it in a similar way as leading to the same topics. The cards can be used during handwriting session, And the anchor categories look like similar the same. People spend a lot of time talking about how the cards will look like when they're participating, and the data source. They spend a lot of time talking about what cards can be used to support the data source and how the data source can be actually defined. The cards placed for each category, we find out that the user interface for the students is very important. Most of the cards of the student sites were about how the tool will look like. Then the analytics method, and then the privacy. Privacy is really important for students, and when you give the cards, they tend to play them to make an argument, because in the end, it's their data that is being used. Teachers and course directors tend to play cards that are actually more about the learning objective as expected, but they also were able to talk about the data sources and the analytics method. Is that they have this idea that the learning objective is the most important thing where the learning analytics tool should act, and they have idea of the data sources that information will come from. For data scientists, we expected for them to be the experts in the analytics method, so they spend a lot of time playing cards in this. But they were also able to participate in talking about privacy, testing side, and the analytics side that they would like to do. The developer, we all expected that they play the cards about development tools. However, they were also able to work into user interface and the analytics method, even when the developer was not expected to be an expert in data science. In retrospect, the stakeholders played the cards where they're considered experts, where the cards allowed them to contribute to other technical concepts. The students were able to discuss analytics methods in teachers contribute to data sources, beyond talking only about learning contents. In summary, the LADECK effectiveness provides a common learning analytics language. The card serves as hints for participants to structure their ideas, using in a language that others could understand. The data scientist uses concepts that maybe the learners can understand, but the cards actually give a central point for them to have a discussion. The expressiveness of the deck is that categories and cards provide a broad coverage of key components in an LA tool. The visual representation of the process reminds non-experts of options. When you give them options, it gives them something to talk about. If you don't give anything, they don't have the words to actually talk about privacy. Facilitating creative combination of information and ideas. Some suites generate more discussion than others. Privacy and user interface are the mostly relevant topics for everyone. But we have to keep going doing the other section, so the learning analytics tools can be done. In other cases, ideas converge, and the code design process continues. This means that the code design process can be done if you actually use the tool. For future practice of people that want to use these cards, we want to add more cards for each category. There are new learning design concepts and data sources that are needed for in-depth design details. The learning context and learning design is another whole new world. We start with just one card, but we can create a lot of more things about the learning context. It allows teams to create their own cards. We have to make the tool flexible enough to support new cards and categories. The map can be as good and big as you want to. And the thing is that you have to give this flexibility to people. Then we have to create awareness about the importance of co-design. We have been working in co-design in learning analytics for more than for like 3 years. And we still think that the cards is the first step into the co-design. Another tool that we have seen is that you can start from some really simple things like the cards and then move into inviting people to very important things like how the coding will work, how the analytics method and the algorithm actually works. Not everything has to be a black box. Practitioners most promote stakeholders' participation at any moment during the process, and the tools actually give you something to work without being an expert in co-design. So thank you, everyone. You can download the LADECK in this link, and we have gained people downloaded this thing and report their things back, something that we may report later. But the most important thing is that you can share the tools and share what you think about the LADECK with us by downloading this version. So thank you.